The Sony a7 III has been released in 2018 and is one of the most popular Sony full-frame cameras on the market. But is it still worth in 2021? In this video we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about the pros and cons of the Sony a7 III. And at the end of this video I also wanted to give you my honest opinion on the Sony a7 III, if it's still worth in 2021. So I hope you enjoyed, and I would say we also get straight into it and start with the pros. So the Sony a7 III is a 24 megapixel camera and it has 693 autofocus points. And when I was photo shooting with the Sony a7 III for the first time, I was just amazed by the autofocus. It's incredibly good, and especially the eye autofocus is just overwhelming. I love to photo shoot with this camera because each photo you take is just sharp. And another great thing about the Sony a7 III is that you can shoot up to 10 photos per second. So when you're, for example, into sports photography or wildlife photography, this camera is good because, you can do so many photos at the same time. And I really miss that with full frame cameras, because the Sony a7 II can only shoot up to 5 photos per second. And another great thing about the Sony a7 III is that you can shoot 4K and you also have in-body stabilization. And so far with my a6000, I was only able to shoot in 1080p, and I struggled a lot with the camera itself because there's no in-body stabilization with the a6000. And when I was doing video with the a6000, I struggled a lot because some of my footage was so shaky, especially when I was doing handheld footage. So with the a7 III, I like it a lot that you can do handheld footage, and your footage, your video material, isn't so shaky. So this is great because then you can choose for more from your footage, and this is better for your videos then. And furthermore, what I also like about the Sony a7 III is that you have an audio jack on your right side and a headphone jack. So when you're, for example, into filmmaking or professional work, you can use that and put, for example, a microphone on top, like my Rode mic, and then you can travel and vlog, and you have then better audio. This is also another thing I like. And one of the best things about the Sony a7 III is that you have 2 SD card slots. And when you're, for example, doing weddings, this comes handy because I wouldn't like to go with my camera to a wedding and then only have 1 SD card slot, because you never know. You might break your SD card accidentally, or your camera breaks, and then what do you do then? So that's why I like that the Sony a7 III has 2 SD card slots, and this can really, save your whole photo shoot. So this is a big advantage with the Sony a7 III. And the last thing I love about the Sony a7 III is that you also have the better batteries with the Sony a7 III, and these ones are actually a bit bigger than the Sony a6000 batteries. So here are basically the Sony a6000 batteries, and they're a bit smaller and they are not as good, in my opinion, than the ones from the Sony a7 III. And recently, when I was photo shooting with the Sony a7 III, we only were photo shooting with 1 battery, and we were shooting for around 3 hours, and it wasn't even half empty. So this is a big pro from the Sony a7 III, that the battery life, lasts so long. But on the other side, there are still some things I dislike about the Sony a7 III. And the first thing is that there's no flip-up screen. So when you, for example, want to vlog with this camera, it's actually, there are some ways. For example, you can use one of these things and you can put it on top. And this is actually a cool budget, a way, how to get a flip-up screen. But with the Sony a7 III, if you purchase it, you don't have the flip-up screen, and when you are vlogging, you cannot see yourself in the mirror. So this is a thing I dislike, but I don't really do a lot of vlogging anyway, so for me it's not a big problem. But of course it would be handy with the Sony a7 III if you have an articulating screen, so you can see yourself in the mirror. And another thing I wanted to mention about the Sony a7 III, which I dislike, and this is something I noticed on my photo shoots with this camera, is that after a while when you photo shoot with this camera, it's actually pretty heavy, when you just shoot with 1 hand, because on my photo shoots I shoot with 1 hand because on my other hand I have my gimbal, because I'm also recording my behind the scenes. So when you photo shoot for around 3 hours with just 1 hand, you do realize, especially with a big lens, that your arm basically falls off. and the Sony a7 III is around 650 grams. So for me personally, I would rather, photoshoot with an APS-C camera because they are way lighter than the Sony a7 III. But this is something you have to know. Still, it's not a huge deal because if you're just, just doing photos or videography and you hold it with two hands, you won't have any problem. But this is something what I realized in my experience if you only shoot with one hand. And another thing, and this is very personal. For me, I was photoshooting with this camera, and when you think about it, it's kind of also an expensive camera when you compare it to most of the APS-C cameras. And when you're a beginner out there, I mean, it's very costly, and especially the lenses with the Sony a7 III, they can go between 500 to 1,000 euros or even more. So when you go full frame, I just feel like, and especially with the a7 III, the lens choices are pretty expensive. And if you are, just starting out, this can be a bit overwhelming because, I mean, you have the kit lens, usually with the a7 III, and it works fine. But still, if you want to get a new lens, you have to pay another 500 to 1,000 euros. So you probably ask yourself now, is the Sony a7 III still worth in 2021? And the short answer is definitely yes. So in my opinion, I believe it's worth in 2021 because, it's a 24 megapixel full frame camera. You can shoot 4K, you have in-body stabilization, you have an amazing battery life, you can use the audio jack, the headphone jack, you have 2 SD card slots, and all this makes it amazing in my opinion if you're, for example, into professional photography or videography. And even though it's kind of expensive for beginners, like I said before, I still believe when you compare it to other cameras on the market, I mean, there are cameras which are 4,000 euros, 6,000 euros. So it's still kind of a bargain if you do it to the right choice. I mean, the best idea is to always get it when you are in a sale, season, for example, Black Friday. Then it's definitely worth it. But you always have to ask yourself, what do I do for kind of work? I mean, are you just a beginner? And if, you always have to ask yourself that, because if you're just doing beginner stuff photos where photo shooting your puppy or or with friends, if you're just doing that, you definitely would be fine with the APS-C lineup, with the a6000, a6100, a6400. These are also amazing cameras with great autofocus, and I feel like a lot of photographers out there, they go on YouTube and they see so many people with the best cameras, the A7 III, A7 III and everything basically. And they believe they have to get this gear to be a great photographer. But, even with APS-C cameras, you can do great photos and they are all in a good budget range. And I use still the a6000 today for my photo shoots because I'm happy with this camera and it performs excellent for the work what I do. So you always have to ask yourself, what do you need and what can you afford? This is an important question you always have to ask yourself because cameras are expensive and before you know it, you can spend 2,000 euros on cameras, so this is something you have to know before making a decision. But still, the a7 III is in my opinion still worth in 2021, especially because it's now a bit cheaper than it was in 2018. So if you can, go for it. But if you are a beginner, it's definitely good to start with the APS-C lineup, in my opinion. So guys, I hope I helped you with this video, and I hope also my opinion helped you with making a decision. And if you want to still see more content from the Sony a7 III, you can definitely also check out my photo shoot behind the scenes with Muriel on the top left, where we are photo shooting with the Sony a7 III in different photo shoot locations. And guys, also a big thank you to you for watching. And a last question also, do you think the Sony a7 III is still worth in 2021? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, thank you so much again for watching. Take care of yourself and see you next time. Bye.